Hello everyone, Ashna is here. Welcome to the 11th session of presentation, ICSE Class 9, Paper 2, Literature in English. In today's session, let us deal with the poem Television, written by Roald Dahl. About the poet. Roald Dahl was a British novelist, short story writer, poet, screenwriter, and wartime fighter pilot. His books have sold more than 250 million copies worldwide. So Dahl was born in Wales. He served in the Royal Air Force during the Second World War. He became a fighter ace, scoring 5 confirmed victories and subsequently an intelligence officer, rising to the rank of acting wing commander. He rose to prominence as a writer in the 1940s with works for children and for adults, and he became one of the world's best-selling authors. He has been referred to as one of the greatest storytellers for children of the 20th century. His awards for contribution to literature include the 1983 World Fantasy Award for Life Achievement and the British Book Award as Children's Author of the Year in 1990. The Times placed Dahl 16th on its list of the 50 greatest British writers since 1945. So the poem Television by Dahl is a long, didactic poem written in a light tone with a message that is relevant in our times. It is an earnest appeal to parents to wean their children from watching television to reading of books. In their craze for the idiot box, that is television, children have lost their innocence. They have become unruly and disobedient. They are no longer interested in the world of fantasy in children's stories. The poet is saddened that watching television in excess makes children dull and unimaginative. So, the parents must throw the television set out of their homes and replace it by a set of books. They will at first face bitter opposition, but later they will be thanked for this thoughtful or good action. Dahl's opposition to television watching is because of it being a passive process during which we are not as actively engaged with the material as we are during the process of reading. This passivity makes our brain slow and strained. So let's know more about the poem. First stanza. The most important thing we have learned so far as children are concerned is never, never, never let them near your television set. Or better still, just don't install the idiotic thing at all. So the poem opens in an abrupt, dramatic way. The poet addresses the parents to convince the children about the negative impact of watching television on their minds. He says that they have learned an important lesson about television. It is that television is an idiot box, that it makes the viewers stupid and dull. Therefore, the children should not be allowed to come near the television set and view its programs. The poet adds that the television set should not be installed inside our houses at all. Second stanza. In almost every house we have been, we have watched them gaping at the screen. They loll and slop and lounge about and stare until their eyes pop out. Last week, in someone's place, we saw a dozen eyeballs on the floor. So the poet gives a general observation here. He says that It has been observed that children sit or stand before the television, sit lazily, and stare at the screen continuously. They go on watching television until their eyes seem to come out. The poet humorously says that a week ago he saw a dozen eyeballs of children lying on the floor as a result of excessive television watching. So, students, the meaning of the word lol is nothing but move or stand in a lazy manner, and slope is the same way, spend time lazily. Lounge means sit or stand in lazy manner. Next stanza. They sit and stare and stare and sit until they are hypnotized by it, until they are absolutely drunk with all that shocking, ghastly junk. Oh, yes, we know it keeps them still. They don't climb out the window sill. They never fight or kick or punch. They leave you free to cook the lunch and wash the dishes in the sink. So, children go on staring at the television screen. They seem to be hypnotized by it. But what they get out of this activity is useless and harmful stuff. The poet admits that parents have some advantage in letting the children watch television. Children remain quiet and do not disturb them. They do not climb out of the windows, nor do they indulge in fights with one another. They leave their parents free to cook lunch or wash utensils lying in the sink. The poet here cautions against the inherent danger in getting such freedom by the parents. Next stanza. But did you ever stop to think, to wonder just exactly what this does to your beloved thought? It rots the sense in the head. It kills imagination dead. It clogs and clutters up the mind. It makes a child so dull and blind. He can no longer understand a fantasy of fairyland. His brain becomes as soft as cheese. His powers of thinking rust and freeze. He cannot think, he only sees. So, here, this is the crux. Here, crux means the most important issue or the point. This is the crux of the poem. The poet uses all capitals to emphasize his point. He asks parents if they have ever considered what harm television does to their children when they continue to watch it for a very long time continuously. He says, it rots the sense in the head. It kills imagination dead. So this is and should be the major concern of all parents. Television watching is a passive activity. It blocks fresh thinking. So it makes the child viewer dull. He cannot distinguish between the real and the fantastic. That is fantasy. His brain becomes as soft as cheese and he loses the power to think and imagine things. So, this has been confirmed by many independent research surveys. Next stanza. All right, you will cry. All right, you will see. But if we take the set away, what shall we do to entertain our darling children? Please explain. We will answer this by asking you, what used the darling ones to do? How used they keep themselves contented before this monster was invented. Have you forgotten? Don't you know? We will say it very loud and slow. They used to read. They would read and read and read and then proceed to read some more. Great Scott, gadzooks. One half their lives was reading books. The nursery shelves held books galore. So here the poet is aware of the parents' objection. He knows that the parents will ask him if the television set is removed, there will be no means. If the television set is removed, there will be no means left with them to entertain their children. So they will like to know as to how to entertain them. So the poet retorts by asking a rhetorical question as to how they used to entertain themselves as children before this monster, that is television, was invented. Perhaps they have forgotten. As children, they used to read and read and read. The nursery shelves were full of books. The shelves were filled with books. Surprisingly, they would spend half of their lives reading books. So, reading books was the only and the main source of entertainment in the past. So, students, let us stop for this session here. Before I wind up, let me just brief out what we have learned in today's session. Television is a poem that gives a rude shock to the young TV watchers. However, it makes them aware of the truth about TV watching. Parents who are addressed in the poem directly realize how they have neglected their duties towards their children by allowing them to go on watching TV in order to buy time and peace for themselves at home. So the poem begins on an abrupt and dramatic note. The poet addresses parents and exhorts them never to let their children come near the television set. He goes on to the extent of saying that the idiotic thing, that television set, should not be installed at home at all. He cautions parents against the excessive watching of television by their children. So the children go on staring at the television screen for hours. So their eyeballs, out of exhaustion, come out. In a hyperbolic manner, the poet says, last week in someone's place, we saw a dozen eyeballs on the floor. So the poet admits that there are some advantages to the parents as their children watch television. The children remain quiet and do not make mischiefs. They do not disturb their parents. The parents get time to do domestic chores. But the disadvantages of too much television to the children cannot be ignored. By using all capital letters, the poet underlines the fact that watching television in excess means the death of imagination. He says, it rots the sense in the head, it kills imagination dead, it clogs and clutters up the mind, it makes a child so dull and blind. So the poet then introduces the parents' point of view. The parents might ask him how their children will be entertained in the absence of the television. The poet reminds them that they have forgotten how, as children, they read books when there was no television. In the past, books were a good source of entertainment. Then he refers to several books of adventure and fantasy used to be read in the past by the children. So, students, the remaining lines of the poem will be explained in the coming session. So, let us know in the coming session what are the several books of adventure and fantasy referred by the poet and the poet's appeal to parents. Thank you, students.